Every time the holiday season approached, my in-laws would decide everything. The schedule, the location, the menu, all were dictated by them without bothering to ask for my or my husband's opinion. This year, when I suggested having a private Thanksgiving celebration, my mother-in-law, Judith, immediately dismissed it and even mocked me. Don't you understand what tradition means? My husband, Marcus, just shook his head and told me, don't make a big deal out of it. But I couldn't stay silent anymore. And this year, I had a plan. Every holiday season, I felt a growing sense of suffocation within me. Judith, my mother-in-law, acted as if she had the final say over everything in this family. It wasn't just about a dinner or a celebration. She controlled everything, the schedule, the venue, the food. Every time a holiday neared, I felt like an outsider, someone without a voice. Every decision she made, no matter how big or small, was treated as untouchable. And this continued year after year. This Thanksgiving, I gently made a suggestion, hoping we could have a celebration of our own, free from her decisions. I think we'll host our own Thanksgiving at home this year, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though a growing fear had already begun to creep in. Judith scoffed, her eyes filled with disdain. Don't you understand what tradition is? She said, as if I had just said something ridiculous, a joke not worth taking seriously. Marcus sat beside me, silent, his expression unchanged. He said nothing, just shook his head. Don't overreact, honey. It's not worth it. His words echoed in my mind, cold and distant, like a warning not to expect change. Neither he nor Judith understood how exhausted I was from enduring all these years. Every year, I told myself to just be patient a little longer, and things would eventually change. I prepared the dishes she liked, wore the clothes she picked for me, let her choose the Christmas music, even though I had already prepared a playlist of my favorites. Every time I saw her grab the remote and select songs, I just stayed silent. Every gift I wrapped with care, every little detail I paid attention to. But all those efforts were like waves crashing against rocks, unseen, unacknowledged. At first, I thought my patience would pay off. But by the second year, I felt disappointed. I no longer felt joy during the holidays. No matter how hard I tried, I was still just an outsider in their eyes. I began to realize that nothing I did would ever be enough for them to see me as part of this family. By the third year, I simply stayed quiet. I no longer tried, no longer hoped. Each holiday, I felt like a ghost in my own home. No one looked at me. No one asked my opinion. Judith kept making decisions, and I simply followed in silence. By the fourth year, I started feeling choked with resentment. One morning, just as I returned from a business trip and walked into the house, I was stunned to see Judith standing in the living room, waving me in as if she were welcoming an important guest. But as I walked in, I realized she hadn't consulted me beforehand. Judith had invited over a dozen of her friends to host a party in my house without notice, without asking, without permission. She had used my kitchen, my chairs, my living room, everything I had spent years building. She acted like it was her own home. I realized that Marcus knew, but he did nothing. He stayed silent, as if he saw nothing wrong. The feeling of suffocation was overwhelming, as though all control over my life had been stripped away. I stood in the middle of the living room, watching the guests laugh and chat, but I heard nothing. Only emptiness, only silence within me. I felt abandoned in my own home, like someone useless. Judith, still standing there, her eyes gleaming as if she had won. That night, I stayed awake. Not because of work, not because of thoughts about the future, but because I knew I had reached my limit. I could no longer live in silence. This year, I would not stay quiet anymore. One morning, as sunlight began to stream through the window, I was sitting at the kitchen table, hurriedly eating breakfast when the phone rang. It was Judith. That name always filled me with a sense of dread. Every time she called, I knew I would receive another request, a command I couldn't refuse. I didn't want to pick up, but I could not do it either. You'll prepare the bread tray for Thanksgiving, right? Judith said as soon as I answered the call. Her voice was so casual, without even a hint of doubt about my compliance. It was nothing more than an order I was expected to follow. I tightened my grip on the phone, trying to keep my voice from revealing the dissatisfaction within me. But inside, a wave of anger was rising, like a fire burning through every part of my body. I looked out the window and took a deep breath to regain my composure. I couldn't let her see me as weak. I couldn't let her believe I would always be the obedient one. "I think we'll host our own Thanksgiving at home this year," I said, trying to keep my tone gentle, even though there was a silent storm raging inside me. Judith was silent for a moment, then suddenly burst into laughter. That laugh rang out as if I had just said something utterly ridiculous, some meaningless joke in her eyes. "Don't you understand what tradition is?" she said, her voice thick with mockery. "The whole family gathers to celebrate together. Don't be foolish. Tradition is a part of family. Don't you get that?" I could feel the contempt dripping from every word she spoke, each one like a knife to the heart. Why did I have to endure this feeling over and over again? Why did I have no right to decide anything, no voice in my own home? Beside me, Marcus sat in silence. He said nothing, just let out a sigh, as if he were used to calls like this. We both knew he wouldn't do anything. He simply looked at me, distant, like a stranger. Not a word of defense, not a single comforting sentence. He just sat there, looking at me with tired eyes, then turned away, as if avoiding a painful truth he didn't want to face. "There's nothing I can do, honey," Marcus finally said after a long pause. "You know she won't change. Just don't blow it out of proportion." His voice was calm, but to me, it felt like a slap. Each word he said cut deep. He had no idea what I was enduring. Why couldn't he see the pain in me? I wanted to object, to scream that I couldn't live like this anymore. But all I could do was stay silent. Every word I wanted to say caught in my throat. "I'm so tired, Marcus," I whispered, but my voice was too weak for him to hear. In my heart, Judith's words still echoed. "I think we'll host our own Thanksgiving at home this year." Even if she laughed, even if Marcus shook his head, I would stand firm. It was time I spoke my truth, time I stood up for myself. I invited Judith and her husband Howard to dinner at our home, but there was nothing light or easy in my heart. This time, I decided not to confront her directly, but to play a role, a performance she would never see coming. "I'll follow the family tradition, Mom," I said when I invited her, doing my best to keep my voice as gentle as possible. My words were like a perfect mask, hiding the bitterness I couldn't speak aloud. When Judith and Howard arrived, I got up to greet them like a gracious host. Judith wore her usual striking red dress, her sharp eyes scanning every inch of the room. I could feel her gaze locked onto me, evaluating my every move. Howard, always quiet, trailed behind Judith like a shadow. Though she was the one who made every decision, he still stood there, eyes lowered, saying nothing. I smiled, but my smile couldn't hide the fatigue within me. "Please make yourselves comfortable," I said, guiding them to the dining table. Judith sat down, her eyes never leaving me for even a second. Howard sat next to her, silent as always, his gaze distant and unfocused. I could feel the tension thick in the air, and I knew the moment had come. I stood up, pretending to head into the kitchen to fetch more food, but really, I just needed a moment to collect myself. I had everything ready. After a brief pause, I returned to the living room and turned on the TV. The screen lit up, and the first video started to play. It showed Judith barging into my private room without knocking, without any courtesy at all. She rifled through my things like I wasn't someone worth respecting. Judith sat there, staring at the screen, and I could see her gaze begin to shift. She said nothing, only let out a heavy breath. But I knew she was uncomfortable. The next video showed Judith chatting with Howard in the living room. She mocked him for being voiceless, for having no say in the family. "He doesn't have a say in this house," she sneered, her voice dripping with disdain. The final clip was recorded from a car on the day of my wedding. Judith, in a casual voice, said to Howard, "It won't be long before she leaves him." That sentence hit me like a punch to the gut. I knew then she had never seen me as a real member of this family, only as something temporary, a replaceable part she could discard at any moment. The living room fell silent. No one said a word. Judith sat there, gripping her teacup tightly, her expression no longer calm as it had been at the start. Howard lowered his head, his eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding mine. Marcus stayed silent, but I could sense the confusion overtaking him. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't fix any of this. I placed the remote control on the table and turned to face Judith and Howard. My gaze never left them, even as anger surged within me. I smiled, but it was no longer the smile of someone being submissive. "I've been preparing for this day," I said, my voice calm but firm. This family had long forgotten who I was, but today I would show them that I deserved to be respected. There was no apology. Instead, Judith immediately went online and posted a long, dramatic message full of pitiful language. She blamed everything on me, the selfish, cold-hearted wife, the destroyer of the family. She has no empathy, no understanding of family. "She's made all of us suffer," she wrote. Every word was like a blade, slicing through my heart. Those weren't just words. They were an attack on my dignity, on my very place in this family. Her post spread quickly among the relatives. Each time I saw a new notification, my heart ached. Some believed her and began to criticize me without even asking what really happened. Others were unsure who to believe but ultimately chose silence, staying away from the conflict. And the rest simply avoided me altogether, as if I had ceased to exist. That old feeling of being cast out, abandoned, returned once again. Marcus sat there, his eyes glued to the screen, silent. With every passing second, I could feel the tension in the air. He said nothing, offered no comfort. He just read quietly, his brows furrowed, though his eyes held no change. I looked at him, and my heart sank. I wanted him to take my side, to say something, anything, to protect me. But he remained silent. When I couldn't bear it any longer, I finally spoke, my voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "Marcus, what are you doing? Can't you see? Your mother is slandering me, hurting us." He looked at me, his eyes softening. It took a long moment before he finally spoke, his voice low and weary. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore." He said it as though he had just realized something that had always been right in front of him. His voice was heavy with bitterness, as if a truth he had long avoided was now impossible to ignore. I had once hoped that Marcus would open his eyes, that he'd stand up for me one day. But now I understood that moment would never come. He couldn't do anything, and I couldn't change him. I was simply too tired. This feeling, being abandoned, being hurt by those I loved most, had become too much. I didn't need an apology from Judith. I didn't need Marcus to say anything. All I needed was respect and acknowledgement. But perhaps I was wrong to expect that from these people. When Judith picked up Marcus's call, her voice came through the speaker, calm and casual. "Marcus, what's the matter?" "Mom, I need you to take that post down. Right now," Marcus said, his voice cold and resolute. I could hear the firmness in every word, but I also knew that to Judith, her son's words meant nothing compared to the power she had always held. "Take it down?" Judith scoffed, her tone light but laced with meaning. "You think I'll just do what you say? I'm only telling the truth. If you don't leave her, I won't survive." That sentence struck me like a cold thorn to the heart. I looked at Marcus, his eyes wide in shock. Judith's words weren't just cruel. They were a threat. She wasn't just trying to push me out. She wanted to control him, force him to choose between me and her. Her voice thundered in the room like a storm. But this time, I knew I could no longer stand by and let her control us. Marcus clenched his jaw, his shoulders tightening as if bracing himself against the weight of her manipulation. After a long silence, he spoke, his voice filled with weariness. "Mom, you've done enough. You came into our room without permission, went through our things. You've driven a wedge between us with your lies, everything you've said about me, about her. Even wishing for our divorce. Can't you see how wrong that is?" Judith, on the other end of the line, began to cry. Her voice cracked with sobs. "You say that because you don't understand. I only want you to be happy, but she's not worthy of you, Marcus. Everything I've done was for you, for our family." But this time, Marcus didn't soften. I saw him clench his fists, the blood in his face gone pale from the chill of her words. There was no guilt in him now. No fear. He had heard enough lies, endured enough manipulation for far too long. Enough, Mom, Marcus shouted, startling me. You've lied to me so many times, hurt me and my wife enough. I can't let you keep controlling my life like this anymore. He paused, took a deep breath, then continued. You need to take a good look at yourself. From now on, I won't be listening to you anymore. A long silence filled the room. Judith didn't respond, just the sound of her crying, thick with resentment, disappointment, and rage. But there were no more protective arms shielding her. Marcus had said everything he needed to say. Then he hung up. I couldn't believe what I had just heard. After all these years of living under his mother's shadow, he had finally done the one thing I had always hoped for. But the silence after that call felt heavy. He hadn't just ended the conversation. He had blocked her number. Marcus sank into his chair, leaning back, and looked at me. His eyes were full of exhaustion. I should have done this a long time ago, he said, his voice low and hoarse, like someone who had just shed a massive burden. But you were right. My mom went too far, and I've put up with it for too long. I sat beside him, gently placing my hand on his. I know it wasn't easy for you, but I'm proud of you, I whispered. Marcus bowed his head, as if releasing himself from a lifelong weight. We sat there in silence, and in that moment, I realized no matter how hard the battle ahead might be, we could face it together. But Judith didn't stop. She was like a relentless storm, spreading rumors, tearing apart everything around her. After a post spread through the family group, I found myself drawn into a never-ending war I never asked for. The things she wrote about me online left me breathless. The selfish, cold-hearted wife, the destroyer of the family. Every word was a sharp blade cutting into my heart. Things escalated even further when, one day, I was home alone and heard a knock at the door. It echoed like thunder in the stillness of the room. I opened it and saw two police officers standing there. Their eyes were serious, devoid of any sympathy. Good afternoon, ma'am. We received a report that you're a psychological threat to your husband, one of them said, calm but grave. I froze, unable to believe what I was hearing. A psychological threat, I gasped, trying to stay calm while my chest tightened. There must be some mistake, but deep down, I already knew who was behind this. Judith. It had to be her. She must have done something to frame me, to turn me into the villain in everyone's eyes. Without thinking further, I immediately called Marcus. The phone rang in my hand, my voice trembling as I said, Marcus, the police just came to our house. They said I'm a psychological threat to you. There was a long pause. Then, moments later, Marcus sent me a screenshot, a text from Judith. The message read, If you don't leave her, I won't survive. My voice caught in my throat as I read those words. It felt like the world around me faded into nothingness, and all that remained was that one sentence. I could picture Judith sitting somewhere, wearing that cold smile, feeling empowered by the control she believed she still had. Won't survive? I whispered internally, numbness spreading through my chest. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He only sent me that screenshot, then silence. I stared at the screen, waiting for more, but nothing came. I could sense the heaviness in his breathing, the long-suppressed pressure that was finally beginning to erupt. Eventually, after what felt like forever, he spoke, his voice low and resolute. Don't worry. I'll take care of this. He didn't just say the words. I could hear real anger in his voice for the first time in years. Genuine, justified anger. Then he hung up. The silence after that call gave me chills. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me was still afraid. What would Marcus do next? Judith's threats didn't just scare me. They made me worry about how far she would go to keep causing harm. Marcus made a decision. He called for a family meeting. Everyone involved would be there. Judith, Howard, Landon, and several close relatives. According to Marcus, this meeting would be the final chance for everything to come to light, for the truth to no longer be hidden. I sat beside him, eyes focused on the names of those who would be present, and my heart felt heavier than ever. When Judith walked into the room, she maintained her usual composed appearance, but I could clearly see the rising anxiety in her eyes. She wore a long floral dress, her expression as familiar as ever. Yet something about her was different this time. She didn't look at me. Her gaze was fixed solely on Marcus. Howard followed behind her, silent like a shadow, not daring to speak. Landon arrived a little late, stepping in with weary eyes, as if he already knew how tense this meeting was going to be. The rest of the relatives sat in the corners of the room, glancing at one another with suspicion. Everyone sat down quietly, the heavy atmosphere settling over the room like a thick fog. Judith began crying the moment Marcus started speaking. "I just want everyone to understand. Everything I've done has been for the sake of my family, for the happiness of me and my wife," he said, tears streaming down his face. "You're my son," Judith cried out. "I only want to protect my children. You don't understand. I've sacrificed so much for this family." Her words rang out, full of pain, like she was performing a scene from a never-ending play. But I saw right through it. She wasn't sacrificing, she was controlling. And I could no longer stay silent. Marcus stared at her for a moment, then stood up without a word. He walked over to his laptop, opened it, and played a recording. All eyes turned toward the screen as the audio began to play. It was Judith's voice, sharp, forceful, threatening. "Don't be stupid. If you don't leave her, you'll never have peace. You can't have both me and her. Don't make me do something awful to her." The recording was only a few seconds long, but it was enough for everyone in the room to feel the venom in her tone. The threats, the pressure, they didn't just make me shiver. They caused everyone to glance at one another, visibly disturbed. The room fell deathly silent. No one dared speak. I looked at Judith's face. Her calm fad was gone. Though tears still streamed down her cheeks, there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. Finally, she raised her head, her voice hesitant and hoarse. "Marcus, you don't understand. I only wanted what's best for you." But Marcus wasn't moved like before. He looked at her, eyes cold, stripped of sympathy or fear. He was no longer the son afraid to hurt his mother. His voice was firm and unwavering as he said, "This isn't love. This is abuse." Everyone in the room recoiled at those words. I saw some relatives look away, unable to face the truth. But Marcus didn't stop there. He pulled out a list, holding it with remarkable composure. "Here's what you've done. You've tried to control our every move, humiliated us in every situation, isolated us from others, spread rumors behind our backs, and threatened us whenever we didn't obey," he said. Every word was like a knife cutting into Judith's pride. Judith's face shifted from tearful to bewildered. She had no defense, no argument. Everything Marcus said was true, things she had done for years. But instead of apologizing or explaining, she just sat there, silent. A suffocating stillness filled the room. The relatives didn't dare speak. They only looked at each other, unsure of what to say. Landon kept his head down, avoiding Marcus's eyes. Howard stayed silent, gripping the sides of his chair. Marcus continued, "From today forward, I won't accept this kind of family dynamic." His voice was powerful and resolute. "I won't let you manipulate me or her any longer." He stood tall, and for the first time in my life, I saw him as truly mature, truly strong. He was no longer a man torn between loyalty to his mother and love for his wife. He had chosen me. He had chosen his freedom. In the end, no one had anything left to say. Judith sat in silence, her eyes full of tears. But now, there was no pride, no arrogance. The whole room was still, the air heavy as if holding its breath in that intense moment. I looked at Marcus. This time, there was no exhaustion in his eyes. I saw determination. Strength. The strength I had waited so long to see. And I knew our lives would change from here on out. But Judith didn't stop. She kept sending messages, emails, even handwritten letters, emotional pleas that felt fake and rehearsed, sent regularly, as if she couldn't accept defeat. The same message in different forms. She couldn't live without her son. "I just want our family to be whole again. Don't let her manipulate you," she wrote in a long, dramatic email on Christmas. That message was soaked in false sentiment, full of tears I knew weren't real. She used Christmas, a time meant for warmth and love, as a stage for a performance she thought would make Marcus feel guilty. She wrote that families are meant to be together, that she only wanted to protect her son from the pain she claimed I was causing. Marcus didn't respond. He simply stared at the phone screen, his eyes empty, as if wrestling with his own emotions. He didn't say a word. He just silently pressed delete decisively, without hesitation, without regret. That Christmas, we experienced a holiday unlike any we'd ever had before. No more arguments. No more criticisms from her. No more teary, guilt-ridden letters. It was just the two of us, no pressure, no manipulation. We held hands, sitting side by side on the sofa, watching the old movies we had loved for years. They were simple films, but they filled the room with warmth and brought us quiet joy. There was no one there to interrupt, no one to make us feel like we owed anyone anything. We brewed hot cocoa on the stove, the scent mixing with the crisp winter air, creating the perfect, cozy atmosphere. Our laughter echoed gently through the living room, light and unburdened. For the first time in so many holidays, I felt no weight on my shoulders. I looked at Marcus, and his eyes were bright, free from exhaustion or worry. We laughed, not because someone expected us to, but because we were genuinely happy. And that, I realized, was the most powerful act of defiance. No revenge. No confrontation. Just living happily without them. When you live for yourself, free from control, free from manipulation, you begin to see that happiness doesn't come from what others can give you, but from the joy you're able to create for yourself. That first holiday without all the noise, without the tension, brought only peace and contentment. And I realized that sometimes the most important thing is learning to let go, learning to live for yourself and the ones you truly love. And we at last had found peace in our hearts.